Creator's generosity and self-giving know no bounds. And one of the wondrous gifts of our Creator is that we are living and functioning in an evolving, unfolding universe. As we just heard, our own charism as sisters and associates of St. Joseph of Peace is that we do value the gifts of creation. And as our understanding and embodiment of our charism of peace evolves, just like our universe evolves, so does our growing awareness of living non-violently and in harmony with the rest of creation. We are called to peace in all our relationships, with one another, with God, with ourselves, and with all of creation. These four relationships are the foundational expressions of Christian spirituality, as well as the grounding for a spirituality of peace. Given the ecological devastation that is present in our times, our relationship to all creation becomes an important lens through which we live our commitment as peacemakers. Through a contemplative stance, we recognize the gifts of creation, whether water, soil, or air, or flowers, animals, trees. We know that they do not only exist for us, but also for God's glory. In their very being, they praise the Creator. St. Basil, in his one of his writings in the 4th century, has a wonderful prayer that reflects that reality. O God, enlarge in us the sense of communion with all living things, our brothers and sisters, the plants and animals. You have given them earth as their home in common with us. We remember with shame how we have exercised our high dominion with ruthless cruelty. The voice of earth, meant to rise to you in song, has been a groan of pain. Make us mindful that all your creatures live not just for us, but for themselves and for you, that they may love the sweetness of life. We have evolved since the 4th century, and yet the devastation that we have brought as a species has also continued to deepen. And as we recognize our call to peace, we have noticed in our own documents and unfoldings as Congregation of St. Joseph of Peace that we are recognizing more and more our call and gift in relationship to creation. Our constitutions, which we reclaimed in 1984, and our chapter documents, especially since 1990, challenge us to pay attention to creation. Our 1990 chapter was called One Creation, One Future, Prophetic Faithfulness. And there we recognize that our charism of peace through justice calls us to respond more fully to the integrity of creation and to commit ourselves to long-term ecological soundness in lifestyles and structures that reflect respect for our earth. In Pursuing Peace, our 1996 chapter documents, we state, we deepened our understanding of being one with earth and with all creation as peacemakers. And in 2002, in Rivers of Peace, we state, we affirm that as peacemakers, we value earth as our teacher, and committed ourselves to engage with the ethics, economics, and politics of water. And most recently, in 2008 and 2009, our documents call us to commit ourselves both personally and communally to deepen our spirituality of peace regarding care of creation, and to pray and study and act to promote a sustainable lifestyle. What is so wonderful that it is not just we who have deepened our awareness to live nonviolently and in harmony with the earth community, personally and as a congregation, but our church communities and our leadership are calling us to wake up to our relationship to creation as an expression of peace through justice. Thus we hear Pope Benedict XVI proclaim in his New Year's message last year, we are called to exercise responsible stewardship of creation and to develop the covenant between human beings and the environment which should mirror the creative love of God. There is a growing clarity among us that our relationship to creation is an essential aspect of our call to peace through justice, to our call to live nonviolently. Margaret Anna, whom we heard about, was practical. And so I'd like to suggest 3 ways how we can live nonviolently with all of creation. And the first one is a familiar one, to deepen our contemplative stance. Annie was talking about presence. And it's our call to deepen how are we present to where we are and what we do. All growth toward nonviolence calls for prayer and a conversion of mind and heart. Bishop Gumbolton says, if we take time to be with Jesus, we too will be converted in mind and heart. It won't work if we try to reason it out. The only way is through a change of heart, a coming into a way of being that is the way of Jesus. How do you deepen your own contemplative stance in communing with the beauty and the gift of creation? And contemplation, from one author, talks about contemplation is a long, loving look at the real. How do you experience the presence of the divine in the changing, falling leaves? How do you experience the beauty and the presence of the divine as you whiff the freshness of autumn breeze? Or looking at the night sky, those of us who are lucky enough to see stars, or the full moon, which we just celebrated, Harvest Moon, last week. How do we take the time to have that long, loving look as we go for a walk, as we engage? And that will help us to recognize, with Meister Eckhart, that every creature is a word of God. How do we receive the word of God in creation? A second invitation that I extend to us is to watch our language. What do I mean by that? I would suggest that it's time for us to banish the word resource from our vocabulary, especially when it comes to gifts of creation. Why? Because the minute I talk about a resource, it is a resource for whom? For the human being. And so we've already objectified those gifts that are present to us. And so to pay attention, our language speaks so profoundly of nonviolence and of violence. It also, when we focus on resource, we move into a user mode, that I use the water, I use the fuel. And to let go of that word might be an invitation, a challenge for all of us. And another invitation I extend to us is to look at the reality that the words nature and creation include the human being. So often we talk about nature or creation out there rather than recognizing that we are intimately connected with the web of life. And when we talk about the rest of creation, might be a way of acknowledging that we are also part of creation. And finally, I invite us to shift from a language of use. Do you use water? Or maybe it's a better way to say, how do I relate to water? How did you pray water this morning? As you took a shower, or as you had your first drink of the day that included warming up some water. To begin to shift our awareness of our relationship to gifts of creation is really the result of a contemplative stance. And finally, I like to focus on food. We all like food, I think. And I would like to invite us to consider praying our food. And by this, I don't mean to zap the food with a blessing at the beginning of the meal. And then we zap it, and then let's go and just scarf it up. What happens is that by praying the food, it's delighting, it's enjoying and savoring the color and the scent and the texture and the taste. So invites us to give thanks for each bite. And particularly those of us who are concerned about weight, slowing down to eat is also a wonderful way of loosening up some of those stunts that we might be concerned about. And as a way of prayer, maybe for your next meditation, you would like to take in a bowl of popcorn and savor each kernel at a time. Another wonderful way to wake up our senses, to be really present to the gifts of creation. Our way of relating to gifts of creation invites us to be in a nonviolent contemplative stance. And it's another way of love, another way of living peace through justice. And I'd like to close with a reflection by Dostoevsky about loving creation as an invitation for us to continue in the way of peace through justice. Love all God's creation, the whole of it and every grain of sand. Love every leaf, every ray of God's light. Love the animals, love the plants. Love everything. If you love everything, you will perceive the divine mystery in all things. And once you have perceived it, you will begin to comprehend ceaselessly more and more every day. And you will at last come to love the whole world with an abiding, universal love. The gift giver's generosity and self-giving knew no bounds. We are called to deepen and evolve and grow into receiving that gift and that generosity.